Okay, okay, let's start talking mouths. Mouths. So before we start looking at it as a 3D object, what we're going to do is look at a few references here, and this is the beginning of the clean version of this cheat sheet I'm going to do here, but I might as well use this as I'm explaining it. So mouths are deceptively complex because there's so much, just like the eyes, there's so much shape in there that we have assimilated over time that differs from person to person. Even within families, mouth shapes can be wildly different. Um, and it's also a good communicative device for when you're designing characters to kind of like instill a personality in them. But when we're looking at lips as a basic shape, we've started talking about dominant and subdominant shapes. Within the eye, you've got a permanent dominant upper eyelid and a permanent subdominant lower eyelid. Now that can differ when it comes to mouths because of the way that jaws are aligned, overbite, underbite, aligned jaws. People who've had dentures, people who have had accidents, maybe people who are permanently pulling a face, kind of thing. Oh, they've always got kind of a face on. The position of a mouth, the lower jaw, respective to the upper jaw, changes the way that people's mouths and lips are formed. So, it's really interesting to see, and we've got examples of two of these. We've got upper, well, there is only two anyway. There's a few examples of upper dominant, and there's a few examples of lower dominant, and then there's a couple of examples. As an example of one that you might think, or you can perceive as an upper dominant, or you can perceive as a lower dominant. So the upper dominant means the upper lip overlaps the lower lip. A lower dominant, it means the lower lip overlaps the upper lip, and we'll have a look at where that happens now. So when we zoom in, let's go for this lady here. So let's just talk about basic shapes first. Let's talk about very, very basic shapes. What have we got? Well, we've got an upper lip and a lower lip, and I think a lot of people, especially if you come from drawing characters and stuff, might have learned through books or online tutorials or anything like that to kind of simplify the mouth. And that's perfect. You don't go in there drawing every last detail of the lip and the mouth and stuff because it's just so much information. So it's good to think about these as general shapes. What I'm going to do on this character, or this subject here, is just how I would base it out, make it very basic. So now I've got my upper lip, which I would shade in. I've not put in any kind. So this is when I'm sculpting, or even when I'm drawing. Sometimes I've not put in the Cupid's bow. The Cupid's bow is that little bit right there. I've not put in any of that information. I'm just basically dictating that's my upper lip, and then I might not do anything for my lower lip, and then I've got a shape or just underneath the shadow made for underneath my lip there. So when I'm sculpting, I'm looking for these shadows. I'm looking for the shapes that I make to create these kind of shapes. The shapes that I make on the mesh to create these shadow shapes, if that makes sense. So let's do that again. So on this upper lip, I would be thinking, right, okay, just a simple shape. Almost like if anyone remembers Kim Possible, all the characters on there had this similar kind of thing. I'm just like, upper lip. With this shape, what I'm controlling is the size of the lip and also the angle of the lip. We've not talked about the angle of the lip, obviously, yet, because we've just started. And then I would just basically do a little bit of a shadow line, shadow box underneath. But then I'll leave it like that for now. Move on to the other subject. When we're thinking more about the intricate details of the lips, then we have to start thinking about the Cupid's bow, which is this section here, which is on some people, like on this subject here, quite prominent. On this subject here, quite shallow. We've got the corners of the mouth, or what I call the nodes of the mouth here, and there's when we look through the different subjects, there's quite a good cross section of the type of nodes of the mouth. We've got the angle of the mouth, or the angle of the lips. So here, we've got a subject here which has got quite big lips, and the angle of the upper lip here is quite shallow. If we're looking at it from the profile, so let's do a quick old sketchy here. So, front of the face, we'll do that in a colour you can see. Front of the face, jawline there. We'll make it a bit bigger as well, because that's terrible. Wang, there you go, boom. Glabella. Nose. So when you talk about the angle of the lips here, I think a lot of people would sketch in lips like that. So that's your upper lip, and that's your lower lip. Very, very simple. You know, that it's a lip, it's an understandable lip, but you know, you've got to look at your subjects. So what I'm going to do here is look at this subject here and think, oh well, actually, you know what? That upper lip is quite steep. It's facing, if I kind of think of it like a plane, like a flat surface, that is pointing kind of in that direction. Or you know what? It's probably even flatter. Probably that. So it's probably facing in that direction. And then I'm looking at the lower lip, and the lower lip is facing kind of upwards like that. So if we look at the direction of lips, these lips are kind of, well, they're always going to cross over anyway, but these lips are quite shallow, I'd say. So the angle's quite steep. They're facing forward. Whereas our subject here, if we get rid of, it's a little bit more as a downward angle. So again, our lips here would be, if we're looking at that, maybe like that, so it's more of a downward angle. And the lower lip here is a little bit flatter, so it's more of a forward angle. Lips, if you, that's how I like thinking about it. If you think of like the lip and where your lip points for the center of your lip, there, and think of the lower lip, they all kind of like, they will cross over because your lower lip will always be pointing some way forward or upwards, and your upper lip will always be facing some way forward and downwards. And then if we look here, this is a really good kind of example. This guy's lower lip is facing well down, and his upper lip is facing well up. So he's got very, very small lips compared to our subject on the left. All the same information is still there, so you can still go through and do like we did before, the kind of sketch stuff. But his is all obviously going to be very, very thin. He's got very, very thin lips. And like I said, it's hard to kind of see. It just kind of looks kind of mess of colours here, a mess of lines. But this is his upper lip. But if you look there, obviously it's so thin that he's not got big, luscious lips like that. They're very thin. So the plane of his lip is facing downwards, like that. And then the same thing is the plane of his lower lip is facing upwards, quite drastically, going upwards. Brilliant. Now here we've got, again, it's not incredible. I'd call this kind of medium angle on this one. This is kind of like a very average angle. So the upper lip there, it's kind of like that, so it's facing like that. The lower lip, kind of like that a little bit, ever so slightly tilted up. So again, we get these like directions where the lip is facing, kind of crossing over. So obviously that's his lip, that's his philtrum, that's his nose. Pardon me. And then the last one here, we're getting quite drastic angles, I think. At least for the upper lip, I think that's quite a drastic angle. So here, this upper lip looks to be facing quite in a steep angle downwards, but the lower lip there is facing in a very straight angle like that. So I've always seen lips when I'm sculpting like this. I'm seeing one plane for the upper lip, a flat plane for the upper lip, and a flat plane for the lower lip, and almost in what direction those planes are facing. If we remember last year when we were doing modelling, think of them as like polygon planes, and each polygon plane has a directional face, doesn't it? You know, that was a massive kind of awakening for me. I don't necessarily have to think about the corners here because that kind of comes with it later on. It's more about the front of the, like this part of the lip. There is one actress, I can never remember her name, it's a Canadian actress, but she is the only person I've ever seen which breaks this mold, because I think she's either she was born with very unique lips, or she's had surgery done to her mouth which didn't necessarily go right, and her lips are like this instead. You know, she's missing this section of her lip. It's very, very strange. Maybe we might look at it. If I remember to remind myself, we might look at it one day. So you can see there, angles of the lips are very, very important. And it's very important to our subject as well. If you're trying to do, so for instance, this, our most extreme kind of angled lip here, very, very flat lips there. it comes from the ethnicity, it comes from the background, it comes from the the genes they're born with. And if we don't observe that information, we're doing that person a disservice. Um, you know, it's very important to be looking at these key features, especially if you're trying to represent a certain race of people, a certain cast of people, or you're trying to just do a really nice likeness or obviously you can take this all into drawing as well. It's not just 3D. You've really got to look at this, and this, the triangle here, that's something that probably makes 90% of how we recognize people, how we perceive people's faces. That's the place where it happens. The eyes, the nose, the mouth in that triangle. So it's really important that we look at that and not think, we're not talked about the sculpting process yet. We're just literally talking about the shapes, very, very basic shapes. You can sketch out that stuff very easily. If I was doing a character's head here, so eyes, nose, if I'm just representing a mouth, what I can do is literally just upper lip, and then that shadow of the lower lip, and we know it as a mouth. We can see that that's a mouth. We don't need to draw all the information. We don't need to draw a lower lip. We don't need to draw all of the upper lip, because then it kind of, sometimes it looks a little bit luscious. Maybe that's not what we're going for. So the angle of the lip is very, very important, and just if you remember back to the first year again in the art fundamentals when you were doing your value studies, and you're thinking about, obviously you've got a cube that's 6 sides and you got 6 very definite values, and then when you go into something like a dodecahedron or a D20, or a cone or a pyramid, the angle the more edges you have to something, the more those values become closer and closer for each plane. So, for instance, this subject here, I would say her plane of mouth there, that'll be quite dark because it's quite downward facing. So it's facing, especially because the light here, you can see the light's hitting the nose. The light's definitely coming from above there. But here, the light coming from the same direction, because we've got a more of a shallower angled lip, that value would be lighter. It's still technically facing downwards, but not as much of a drastic angle as we've seen in that other subject. So really important to know. Again, we can take this into 2D as well. This isn't just 3D. What you learn in one works in the other. So remember that. So the angle of the lips. Now we're going to go into a little bit more detail, and this is fine detail stuff. Fine detail. It's got fine detail. If we think about 5 shapes in the mouth, in the lips, when we're sculpting, we don't have to bring these shapes into separate objects, but as long as we understand that these shapes are almost like underneath the skin, influencing the shape of the lips, then we'll be onto a winner. And I'm sure there's some scientific name for this. I'm sure someone's made some terms for this. They're just peas to me. You got 3 peas in your mouth. Peas is in like the little green vegetable. 2 squashed, 3 round, and it's very, very easy to find. And if you look at yourself, I've got quite thin lips, so I'm like this geezer. My lips are not a million miles away from this, so for me it's a bit harder to see. But on yourself, you might be very more present, especially if you're more fuller lipped, or if you know someone who's more fuller lipped, or anything like that. Just again, grab the face, look at them. You might see this information quite clearly. And if you go for the top lip first, in the middle, right there, so just underneath, this is called your Cupid's bow. Right here, think about a ball, think about a pea right there. And again, some people might not necessarily have this very, very prominent, but I know I have a little bit. If you feel the middle of your lip right there, you might feel a bit more of a shape appear, because you've got like a ball of fat, of cartilage, of flesh, whatever it is, right there. So that's the first P in the middle. Either side of that, we'll do this in different colours. You've got 2 other P's right there. And again, you might see that in yourself quite a lot, or you might not, but you might see in other people. Again, when we think about very stylized lips, if we're thinking drawing, you know, you've got your corners of your mouth there. It's that kind of shape you do with that. You know, when you make these kind of lip shapes. That's your lower lip, like that. So this is your upper lip here. This little shape here, this little downward triangle people often put when they're sketching, is denoting this shape here. And then the little sweep downwards, like there, is denoting the shape made here. So you've got three little like peas, three little balls in your top lip. Underneath on your lower lip, these are the other two. Well, these in purple. Now the difference is there is no ball in the middle. You've got two balls either side. And some of these subjects are actually quite good to look at for this because you'll actually see that. In your lips, you've got two sections like that. That's bad colour for this. We'll go for yellow. You got two shapes there. You got like two balls in your lips. And this is when we're going into fine detail stuff. When we're initially sketching it in, it's good to think about this kind of stuff, but not necessarily actively sculpt it in. It's when you start to refine the shapes, when you're at higher resolutions, that's when you start putting that in. So those are three really important shapes. The outside shape, so around here and around here, they're all secondary. I don't really mind too much if I don't put names and shapes to those, because it's all controlled by this center group here. So let's go look at other subjects and find that shape. Well, here it's very obvious. Right in the middle, we've got, you can see there's a little kind of, whoops, there's a cavity there, and you can kind of see the shadow of it there. That's that center again. And then you've got the two next to it. And here, if you look carefully, right here, you might be able to see a bit of a shadow line out there. Or you can see where the lip underneath is kind of coming inwards, ever so slightly making it concave. Well, that's because you've got the two balls either side, the two orbs. This guy's really hard to see, but if you think about it, if you think that we've all got these shapes in there, some people's are more fuller and rounder, some people's are far more squished. Same jazz. So here you'll have a very squished P. And then you'll have another squished P, and another squished P. And then you'll have another squish P, and then you'll have another squish P. So if I was sculpting this geezer, I honestly wouldn't be worrying too much about that. I wouldn't be really worrying about these kind of shapes because they're so squashed that they basically disappear. And they're so thin as well because obviously his lips are very, very thin. You lose all the information. It's very important. It's very, very good to think about when you've got people with fuller lips. Here, this is quite a nice one because you see, especially in his top lip, you can really see quite spiky. You know, we've got frozen P's here. So here, oh, you got that information. You got that middle P shape in the middle. And then, not quite as obvious, but in those areas you've got the two sides. And then underneath you've got, and here last one, you know, same jazz. We're looking at the exact same information. It's a bit shallower on the top lip. A bit of a small P there. Two small P's there. But because the lower lip is far more dominant, you've got one there, and you got one there. Oops. And any anatomy book worth its salt will show you this when it's talking about the face. It should not just discuss the lips as a solid singular shapes. The lips are influenced by things underneath it. It's why we have throughout time. You look at everything from pre-Raphaelite painting, Renaissance painting, even down to some really not so much Japanese wood printing, but some of the Japanese painters. You know, ancient Middle East, Babylonian paint, anything like that. Anything where people are represented, you'll always see this. You'll always see that stylization of the face, you know. And even I just think of like, I'm a big fan of like 1960s pin-up paintings, like old Coke, and you know, when they're selling, beautiful women selling like baking soda, that kind of stuff. I love those paintings. They're so amazingly well rendered for selling something like soap. I think they're amazing. But they always have this really neat trick, and you'll see it in the sketches where, and again, it's the same idea we're talking about. The graphical shapes inside stuff. They'll just have 2 points for the corners of the mouth, and then they'll have a kind of shape for that middle P, and then again that sweepy little shape for the 2 side P's. And then, just like you'll see it all the time in these old paintings, these old sketches, because it's just that representation, simple representation. Obviously, when you're doing full-on oil paintings or you're doing full-on hyper-realistic sculptures, you'll never really spend that much time worrying about this kind of information. Maybe in the initial stages, but it'll all be lost eventually. But then when you're thinking of stylization, you've got to think about, especially in stylization when we're talking about Overwatch and Anthem and Valorant and stuff, you'll often see the first thing we were talking about, where we're just thinking about the mouth as, so that's your top lip, and that's a shadow made by your lower lip. You're looking at more like this kind of information. And then we're looking more into stuff like 2D novel games or 2D. I mean, you see it in a few Japanese games, you see it in a few Western games, where you're trying to find them. Oh, Dishonored, perfect for it. Yeah, Dishonored's perfect for this. You look at some of the characters in there, and the lips are quite well detailed in this stylized way. It's very, very cool. So, plus again, just understanding these shapes, or understanding what to include, what not to include. I've not included the Cupid's bow on this mouth here, but you can still tell it's a lip. I got those 2 node positions. I got the middle P position, and then I just joined them with small swoops. And then I made like a little bit of a V underneath. That's giving you that slightly open mouth feel. And then I just basically did this, and I've got lips. Dead easy. Dead easy. But you can see on each person, they're all the same. It's all dependent on the size of a person's mouth. Now on top of that, it's the shapes on the outside. Like I was saying before, I'm not too fussed about naming these or really overthinking the shapes, because these change wildly. And then when you're doing asymmetrical sketching, even on a person's face, one side can be wildly different from the other side. It depends completely on the subject. But this is where we're talking more about dominant and subdominant, and you've got to look at really good. You've got to look at certain information. So I'll make these. I'll bring them in so you can still see them, but they're not quite. There you go. So certain bits of information within the lips on the outside dictate the dominant and subdominant. It's not always just about the front, even though that's obviously closer towards us. What I'm talking about here is the corners of the mouth. So if we go to Photoshop, and I'm back. If we look at this subject here, so that's the far right subject, and you can see more of her lower lip. Her upper lip is smaller. It's casting more shadow, sure, but what I'm really interested in is what's happening, if I'm sculpting the outside of the mouth, is what's happening on the outside. And you can often see this as well, 3/4. This is why it's always good to look at a face from different angles as much as we can. If you look at the mouth from 3/4, you'll see that the lower lip almost disappears. That's a bad colour for this. The lower lip almost like disappears into the upper lip. It's not super noticeable here, but when you look 3/4 here, you can see that upper lip comes out to here. The lower lip comes in like that. And this is like really small details as well. It's kind of like the eye, where I was saying yesterday about our Tuesday, about with the corner of the eye. Don't just make it like this. So this is, the tear duct is over here. We're going up this eye. Don't just make it like this, because you're going to have a dominant upper eyelid. Sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes you've really got to focus on your subject. And right here, so if I trace the top of that upper lip, it comes into here. If I trace the lower lip, it comes into here. See how there's this small shape here? This small gap. Well, that's enough. That's enough for us to dictate what's a dominant and subdominant lip. But it's also about the shapes surrounding, around, coming into this area. So if we just draw a bit of a wireframe over this lip and the lower lip, so that's the upper lip, and the lower lip, generally what I find is the curvier of the two lips tends to be the dominant lip. So you can see that upper lip, for me, I perceive that to be quite curvy. It's got more of a curve, even though it's technically facing downwards. The lower lip's a lot flatter. And you can see the upper lip kind of comes like here. And the lower lip comes in like there. So just like you can think about this the exact same thing as an eyelid. In fact, let's think about the mouth as the eyelids of the mouth. That upper eyelid is dominant on the outside there. This lower lip is dominant, this upper lip, sorry, is dominant in the corners there. You can see where the upper lip and the lower lip meet. There's quite an obvious intersection. Sometimes it's a bit harder to see. So we've got this subject here, and this is the one where I was saying before about you could perceive it one of two ways. Because his mouth kind of meets in the same point at the same time. I would read this technically as a dominant lower lip, even though his upper lip is more curvier and is slightly forward of his mouth. But some people might say because his upper lip is more forward of his lower lip, his upper lip is more dominant. So it's if you're cloning me, we were all thinking the exact same thing. Well, the exact same way of looking at stuff. You might have that discussion. Again, this is just the way that I look at stuff. It's not the way that everyone should look and must look at stuff. It's just a way of looking at stuff. So again, if I draw the upper lip, okay, but then if I draw the lower lip, it almost meets in the exact same position. So here, that's a bit interesting. I'll leave this one here and I'll come back to him for a reason. There's a reason why I wouldn't worry too much about this geese or this kind of mouth, because there's stuff in here that distracts from that. Again, this is another one, the exact same stuff as the other guy. They kind of meet in the middle because his lips are so thin. There's not as much. There aren't as many landmarks to basically say, yeah, that's lower or upper dominant or anything like that. Because they kind of meet. Well, his lips kind of meet here, really, and then just become these folds. He is a really good example of a dominant upper lip, and it's quite easy to see. So again, you've got your corners of your mouth. Let's draw the center line where the lips meet. Let's draw the upper lip. Let's draw the lower lip. Very easy to see that that's an upper dominant lip. And the landmarks, the things I'm looking for when I'm tracing these lips is literally where you can see the separation between what would be lip flesh and what would be chin flesh or cheek flesh. You know, on some people it's very, like here, it's very obvious. The skin tones show us the difference. On subjects like this, sometimes it's a bit harder to see because they blend together a lot more. You've got the pinker flesh as it enters into that soft tissue, that sensitive tissue, the inside of the mouth. But as it joins the chin and the cheeks, it does blend into more of this exterior skin. There's very few points in the body where stuff is just like binary on and off. Everything has to blend. Cells don't just turn on, cells blend. But you can see here, like I can see here, that the lip kind of does this. So I can see that that's quite a dominant upper lip. And here, from this angle, looking here, you might say it's a dominant lower lip. Because, as you see here, that goes down. And this goes across like that. But then when I'm looking from this side here, I can see that this actually goes in and this sticks out. So that's another question. What's dominant? What's upper dominant? I read that as upper dominant because of that corner here. So that's 3 of these subjects where we can have differing opinions. But again, this is just the way I look at stuff. It's not the way it might be really not technical, but it might just be a bit too much information for some people to think about all the time. All I'm looking at really is the shape. I'm looking at the corners of the mouth, and I'm looking in the middle of the mouth. I'm looking how things flow and sweep across the face. I'm really not looking at tiny, minute detail. I'm almost looking at it as you would do a comic artist. You know, you've got 10 days to make a comic. You're not going to spend ages drawing every mouth in some really intricate, you know, tiny detail thing. You do big gestural details, and just make sure you understand that if you want to have that person with that big lower lip, you know, overbite, that you're able to do that. So I said there's another feature on the face that is very, very important that I love, and it's around the corners. It's why I called it the node. And we've kind of talked about it. I know I've talked about it in different videos, but it's... who's a good one? Yeah, this subject's a good one. So again, I'll just lower the opacity of that. It's the corners of the mouth here. Right here. Now you've got these two, like, balls of fat and flesh in the corners of the mouth, and these are what these work with the laugh lines. These also what dictate the shape of the exterior of the mouth. Some people have got very prominent ones. Some people have not got very prominent ones. Some people have got ones that are almost like balls of fat. Some people have got some that are almost like stretched skin. If we think back to Pam with the monolids, and we're looking at how there was not much fat, and it's almost like the flesh is being pulled across the eyelid, giving her that monolid. Similar things going on here. Again, eyes and mouths not too dissimilar. So you've got these two balls of fat, and a good way to look at that and find them in the 3/4 view is literally look for shadows. That's all you got to do. So you can see here in this subject, you've got big old shadow right there. Big old shadow. And that's these two little balls of flesh either side. With this subject here, again, you see this actually, he's got quite nice ones because it's hard to see on this edge, but you can see this kind of lump in the corner here. That's kind of this node area. But on the edge that's facing us, you're seeing this shadow. Like that, just like almost like a sharp shadow. And again, this is this little node section here. This guy's an older guy, so his are a bit more differently shaped. Not very obvious on this one, but knowing, like, taking in, everyone's got them, no one's not got them. You know, they'll be here. I don't know why that one's got that. There we go. And last one, again, this is very like that. So you've also got these shapes in the face. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at different ways we can look for features in the face and around the mouth to make these shapes. And they all have reasons for being there, obviously, anatomically, but they all have influence on shapes around them. So some people might have a dominant upper lip because they've got a lot of mass in this kind of shape here, forcing that upper lip to be a bit more prominent, bigger, and then it makes the lower lip subdominant if they've got an overbite, or an underbite, I should say. Overbite, yeah. Lower jaw is further back, because then that makes it up. I've got an overbite. My upper lip is dominant. So yeah. And like I said, I'm going to do a cleaner version of this, so don't worry. But what we're going to do now is jump into the ZBrush. So we've got our digital Frank, and he's got a skull here. I've gone to the liberty of giving him a bit of a nose, and there's a reason why I've given him a bit of a nose. And it all kind of comes down to what I was seeing very commonly in class, where people weren't necessarily I kept saying, imagine the mass, this space here is a mass of flesh in front of the skull. And everyone was basically making the front of the mouth at this position, in line with what would be the skull teeth. And then if you imagine that, if that was the edge of the mouth there, you'd have to step back like a centimetre to then get to the skull, which means that the teeth would be like back here. And your skull's really wacky at that point. So one thing I really want us to think about is the mass of the mouth. before we start thinking about lips, we've got to start thinking about the mass of the lips. And if I make this transparent, you can see there, and this is obviously an approximation, but you can see there how much information in profile is forward of the teeth itself. You know, you've got lips, and you've got fat, and you've got these sections, you've got the philtrum, you've got lower lip, you've got the two little nodes there, you've got muscle there, all this kind of shit. Are you fuller faced? Are you thinner faced? You know, you've still got this information. And this brings everything forward, and it balances out the nose, because some people had very, very big noses and very, very recessed teeth. So everything felt very like long. Some people would push everything back, and the whole face would feel very flat, because they were balancing the nose with the mouth, but the mouth itself was too far back, so everything was like it's just far too far back, which is what we don't want. So yeah, I've brought my little guy in here just to illustrate that point. You've really got to think of the lips, the mouth, the muzzle, the chin, the maxilla, all this kind of stuff. It's like a big old barrel of flesh before you start putting any lips in there. Because when you do start putting lips in there, it makes everything balance out really, really nicely. And we're not going to do open mouths yet. We're just going to literally sculpt in the lips as if we were sculpting into alabaster or clay. Though we're just sculpting in like that, you still need that mass there because you're pushing in, and eventually, realistically, you should be seeing teeth at some point. If you keep pushing in. It's also just a really good jumping off point for making any kind of mouths. Again, we're going to make a standard mouth, and then you can push and pull it and do whatever you want. And quite simply, I'm not going to go into detail on this head. I'm going to get another head for doing this. But quite simply, the easiest way of doing this is making a mass like this for the muzzle, and this would be sculpted on top of a form. Getting something like the damn standard. Finding the middle point, so how do we find the corners of the mouth? Well, they align roughly with the pupils, approximately. So, already, he's got a mouth. You see what I mean? It's as simple as that. And what I was thinking about then was the corners, the nodes of the mouth. Bring it in. I'm not thinking about the 5 P's or anything like that. I'm just basically making this at first. It already kind of looks like a mouth. And that's how I'm going to be showing you how to make mouths at first, is not sculpting them from the face, which I know some people are going to do, even though I'm going to say don't do it, because it's hard to do. People are going to try and sculpt the lips from the face, and it's going to look like everyone's got a permanent pout. Sculpting lips from the face is very hard if you're not confident with building up mass. Because what you've got to do is you're basically sculpting from the skull forward. So you've got to think about all the mass here. And if you don't think about that and how it flows across the face, then you'll just have lips kind of pouting off the face. By having the mass already there and carving into it, what we start off with is someone basically filling the lips with and the cheeks with air, and then we can start to push in a little bit more, because it's always easy to chisel into something that is, I find, chisel into something that is to sculpt out of it. Very, very easy. So what I'm going to do is jump into a sculpt which has no lips, and then I'm going to make some lips the Dave way. So here we are. So we've got Terence, and he has got everything. Obviously, he's not got eyes, so obviously this is the one I didn't do the eyes on. So the eyes are coming next. I'm doing my lips first. I've got that mass there, so I'm thinking about that mass. So that's when I'm pulling out the face, pulling out the nose. I'm building up that mass purely just by grabbing the old clay build-up and building up like that. And moving around and looking from underneath, looking above, looking from the side, looking at 3/4, looking from the front, looking from all the different angles, even maybe 3/4 back. You can look at your people left and right of you. You can look at your family and your friends and your girlfriends and your boyfriends, whoever. Just look at this area and try and almost like blur your brain, blur the mouth out, squint your eyes, and see just what the information is here. So we're going to give Terence a mouth. And again, we're going to go that damn standard route. So BDS, damn standard. I'm heavy-handed, so I bring it down a little bit. But you do want to have something which will make a mark in there. So for me, 22, that's fine. Ooh, don't do that. Size-wise, I've never really thought about it, to be honest. Maybe the size of the eyeball, because all I'm doing here is if I'm too big, I'm destroying too much information around it. This is like he's had his face kicked in. If I'm too small, it's not going to give me the information that I want. It's going to be too thin. So I've got to have enough of a size to my brush to pull in enough of that information. So I'm starting to get a lip shape, but not a really, really thin lip and not a really, really big lip. How do I get the width of the mouth? Well, it's pupils downward approximate. So I can put a little bit of a landmark there. Now, the position horizontally for the mouth, most of the time, is the halfway point between the bottom of the lip. No, it's not even that. It's the top half. Yeah, it's the top half of the lower third. A bit wacky to think about. But if you were just to put a mouth in the middle of this section here, it might look like his philtrum's very long. And that's one. So this is your philtrum. But if no one didn't know, you hear me say the word philtrum. Your philtrum is that little valley underneath your nose there. And there's a disgusting reason why we have that. Your nostrils are either side, like that. And that's because what that is doing is creating an anti-valley, you could call it. So instead of the snot from your nose going right down into your mouth, and if you're asleep and possibly choking you, what it does, it creates a valley. I'm punching the mic once again. It creates a valley which goes downwards like that. It's why when you snotty or you're crying or anything like that, it all runs downwards because it's your philtrum filtering out the snot. A philtrum. So yeah, it's why a lot of people had that long, kind of very earnest, long philtrum, almost like an old English gentleman. It's because you're positioning your mouth too low. I talked about this in one of the classes, but a quick, rough estimate, again, it's very different from person to person, is if you just take your thumb and put it underneath your nose like that, almost like you're making a moustache, screensaver. That gives you an approximate distance from the lower lip, from the lower nose to the upper lip. That's pretty much perfect for me. In that Photoshop file then, looking back, this subject, unless she's got unusually thin thumbs, wouldn't be that case. And this guy, unless he had unusually thick thumbs, wouldn't be the case. So that breaks the rule. But generally, your thumb's depth, poke yourself in the eye, your thumb's depth is the distance from the bottom of your nose to the top of your lip. Of course, if you get it wrong, don't worry about it. Don't Control Z and do it again. Control Z, do it again. Just move stuff into place. So let's get back to making a mouth. So yeah, I put the landmarks in there for the corners of the mouth there, and then I'm just boom. I'm done. And I can look either side, so I can think that okay, yeah, maybe I can need to. I didn't go quite as far as I need to, so I can just pull that back a little bit. That's still pretty much in line with the corners of my mouth. All I've done there is done a damn standard stroke. I just thought about my position of the corners of my mouth and the position of my the horizontal slit of my mouth, and then we're pretty good. We've already got something really good. Naturally, this guy kind of looks like he's got a bit of a. So I might follow this actually. He's got a little bit of an overbite. His lower lip's a bit dominant. Looks a bit thuggish. But what's also helping me here is something I did earlier on. When I put that little shape underneath the chin there, that I've talked about a good few times, that is helping me kind of get that mouth shape already in there. I'm getting something. Now, here comes not the tricky part, but the bit that we have to go back to our reference to, and, this isn't done. And before I start detailing lips, to refining the lips, I've got to think about something else. So if we go back to our reference, there we go. And I'm going to delete that, and I'm just going to erase this because I accidentally put it on the wrong layer. It's what goes on in the upper part of the mouth, in the maxilla where the philtrum is, and underneath the corners of the mouth. Because currently, what we've got here is we're almost like smuggling eggs in our lips, or we've got that kind of feel where we're puffing out our cheeks. It's too fat. It's too big. So what I'm looking at here, and this one's a great subject for this one, is so currently our lips are like this. They're coming out in these big orbs. like this. It's not always the case. It might be for some people, but in this case, I don't necessarily want that. What I'm going to do is use the clay build-up. I'm going to start taking out like this section here and this section here. And this subject's good because you can see that actually being made by this. So this is obviously the laugh line and the node we were talking about here. That's creating a shadow, which is creating that upper dominant lip. And you can see here that this is literally recessed in. Right there. So what I'm going to do is go in there and start clay build-upping out some stuff. So clay build-up. Look at how low res I am. Look at how crap it is. I don't care. I'm just going to start taking stuff out. Just in the corners. Just a little bit. That's looking a bit better. It's looking less like it's puffing out the corners of his lip now. Maybe push back the whole lip a little bit. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's better. So I'm only pushing back a little bit because I'm still yet to fix the surrounding area of your upper lip. Because currently this is still very, very bulgy. And again, you look at different subjects, you look at different people. Some people have got a very swoopy lip like this, where it's a very concave swoop. Some people have got a very straight upper lip like this, where it's a philtrum area, where it's very straight. And some people are like this, where almost they lose that sharp definition of the upper lip, and it's just basically big mass turning into lip. Again, look at your subject. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of swoop to this guy. I feel like I want to just take away some of that lump, that bulginess of his upper lip. I'm just going to just start carefully taking, not too much. Again, I'm being free and open and not having any fear, but I'm still being careful with what I'm doing. I'm not just going randomly taking stuff away. And if I don't like it, I can always add stuff in later on. Again, we're at that stage where it doesn't really matter. At this stage as well, I can probably start to add a bit more information in. You know, again, every time you add something into the sculpt, it's going to start to help communicate the area around it. We've never had a mouth in there, so the lower part of the face has never really felt complete. Now we've got a mouth in there. It's starting to feel a bit more complete. So while I'm working on this, I can also say, okay, yeah, I need to bring this out a little bit. Maybe push this in a little bit. Maybe pushing that philtrum. So I'm going to get a special brush, or the standard brush. I'm just going to push in that philtrum. Yeah. Back to clay build-up. Pushing some nostrils. Yeah. Yeah, man. So you see, just by doing a few more bits like that, I'm starting to get the face looking a bit more realistic. And all I've really done is I've got that mass of the mouth, obviously. I've gone there, sliced across with a dam standard, measuring the position of the outside of the mouth, measuring the position of the horizontal part of the mouth. And then I've just started using the clay build-up just to take away area in this take away mass in this area. Because you can feel it in yourself, you know, this isn't, at least on me, it's not a very big bulgy area. This is quite, it goes in a little bit on me. The lower lip I'm really not bothered with so far, so if it starts to get a little bit wonky, as long as you're being a bit more controlled, that's all fine. What I'm going to do now is just start to design that upper lip. I'm not really working off a reference as well, so I'm just going to kind of have fun with it. I've not put any of the P's in there or anything like that. All I'm going to do at first is just, with the clay build-up, not with the clay build-up, with the dam standard, I'm going to do that trick I did the other day, where I'm going to use Alt and almost use it as a pinch brush. So same thing I did with the eyebrows, eyelids. I'm just going to pinch that in. There you go. So now we went from that to that, from that to that. And it's all about those shadows as well. Now look how much information we've now gained, readable information, just by adding a little bit of shadow. Before we had shadow, but it was soft. And now we've added that plain. Very cool. And I'm just gonna heavy-handed put those nodes in there. If you look at my Laura Bailey sculpt on ArtStation, in fact, any of them sculpts, I might bring them up in a bit actually, you'll see that I've actually really overly defined that a little bit. I should have knocked it back a bit sooner, but it's very, very heavily defined, and it's because all I've done is when I put the lip in there, I've gone back in and I know them nodes are going to be there and there, creating a crease here. So I've just created that crease. I don't care about the state of the mesh again because we're low res and I'm getting in basic information. If I was to Dynamesh this, I lose stuff. So I'm not really bothered yet. What I could do now as well is with the move brush, I could just start to move it and nudge it around. So if I want to have very, very shapely lips, I could obviously bring up, bring that Cupid's bow a bit more up. Pull down those corners of the mouth, they're a bit more kind of arcing. Look underneath, because there I've got like bad lip job lips. So I'll pull these in a little bit. That's better. Lower lip. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get the damn standard, hold alt, so I kind of like using it a little bit like a pinch brush, and all I'm going to do, not the whole way around, because then it starts looking very fake, but just like the middle 2/4 of the lip, I'm just going to find that lower lip. So where it'll then kind of descend, create that balcony turn into the chin. So I'm going to go here and just basically bang, like that. Readable shapes. It still looks goofy at this point, but remember, this is low res. And of course, if I'm not happy with this, I could always just and start again. Which is what I'm going to do. So I can build up that mass. We should always have that mass. Imagine there are teeth behind there, so you need to have flesh. I like having that chin in there, because as you saw, it kind of like helps me get that chin shape in there sooner. Find my lip position, corner position there. Okay, so boom, right there. Yeah, the position of that looks about right. So boom. I'm not defining the upper lip or the lower lip. I'm defining the point of where the lips meet. There you go. Here, what I did then was I just pulled it to make it a tiny bit wider, because it felt like it was a little bit thin. But then I stroked down at the edges there. That's starting that little, what we were talking about before, the little indentations where I sculpt out a little bit. I'm forcing a dominant upper lip, because then I can just, with the clay build-up, start to knock it back a little bit. Make my brush better. There we go. Just a touch. Now, in this point, I don't know if it was like that before in the last one, but now my chin looks a little bit long. I'm looking like my mouth is a bit high. So if my mouth is a bit high, maybe I've not got enough distance between the bottom of my nose and the top of my lip. So what I'm going to do is just start pulling that down. A few millimeters. Again, I'm not pulling it all the way down like this. Not doing that. Just nudging it down. That feels a bit better though. And then from the side, if I want to, I can always just, with a nice big brush, just pull it back a little bit. What's it like underneath? That looks okay. Now that I've got that information in there, do I need to build up anything? Do I need to push anything back so I can start to build up those little node sections in the corner? And that's all I'm doing for that. I'm not doing much. Those little nodey sections we're talking about, all I'm doing is just building those up like this a little bit. And maybe use the damn standard. Again, that pinch brush. In fact, this time I think I might have given him a kind of a thinner upper lip and a bit of a bigger lower lip. So just pinch that up a little bit. Ooh, that's strong. Pull it in. Like that. Because doing that as well helps me define that dominant, subdominant lip, be it lower dominant lip and upper subdominant lip. In this case, it's my upper dominant lip, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the upper lip come out to the corner like here, and have my lower lip come in around here, forcing that upper lip to be dominant. Now, one thing that people often do wrong as well, and I think it's all down to us looking at colour and not necessarily shadow or form or anything like that, is a lot of people over-define that part of the lip. makes it very, very sharp, and almost give it a bit of an angle, so it's got a bit of a swoop. And I don't really see many people with the shape of their face having this internal kind of concave shape. Because if you look at all these people, what's happening here in the corner of the mouth? You've got that balcony that I call it right there, causing that shadow underneath. But around here, it's almost like here goes to concave, and then it goes to convex, coming out like there. So again, it's another one of the examples of when you turn the face even a few centimeters, the whole shape language starts to change, and that's the thing that changes the shadows. So again, concave, straightens up, becomes convex. Concave for a while becomes convex. Concave, not as much, but then becomes convex. Concave to convex. So what I'm doing here is I'm not making a recessed section here. I'm not pulling out too much information here. I might pull it out a little bit at first, then I'll build it back up. So I'll make like, this is a lower lip, definitely, boo. You know, I'll chisel out that lower section so I know that's my lower lip. But then I will just, on the outside here, as it curves into the lower lip, or curves into the mouth, I'll just soften it out a little bit. You know, make it a bit more convex. You'll always see, again, I'm looking, I'm checking, I'm zooming out. I'm not trying to get too close in. Maybe I should kind of zoom a bit further out, like here. But when I'm sculpting, I'm always kind of mainly sculpting in this 3/4 view, because I can see if I build up here, how much am I building up on the opposite side. So as I build up this, I can see how it's reacting on the other side. Boffinus Philtrum. In this case, I'm going to leave my surrounding area, because for this subject, maybe he's got a bit of a fuller lip there. Maybe just... He's got a laugh line, but maybe it's a bit hidden under whatever. Fill this in a little bit. There we go. So the mouth is quite simple with its general forms, but you know, you got the lower lip and the upper lip. They're two forms right there. They're basically just planes, curved planes. Underneath on the lower lip, you've got the two sections on the lower part of the mouth here, which you've got to look at your subject for that. You've got to look at your reference for that. Some celebrities have almost like overpronounced. It's like they have this. You see it in like some actors really have quite pronounced lower lips like this. A lot of old Renaissance sculptures will also have this, because also because the old Renaissance sculptures were always emphasizing stuff. They're always kind of like pushing stuff. Muscles were bigger, fat deposits were kind of like far more Rubenesque. You know, these kind of sections, they'd puff them out a little bit. But this section here, you know, what's going on in this section? Like you saw before, in the sculpting process, I pushed that back quite a bit at first to define where my lower lip is. And then I'll pull it back out, because then I can control what I'm doing. I can control the shape of that, rather than trying to rely on trying to nail that shape early on. So let's bring that back how I had it before. There we go. Now what I can do here is use the move brush and fix up that bottom lip, because currently it's a bit of a feminine bottom lip. What I mean by that, it's very curved. So again, we look at these different subjects. You've got hello. There you go. You've got quite a curved lower lip, quite a straight bottom lip, quite a straight bottom lip, quite a curved with a bit of a straight lower lip, very curved lower lip. So as a stereotype, female characters, more feminine characters will have rounder bottom lips. More masculine characters, male characters, will have a straighter bottom lip. Even if they have a larger lower lip, the bottom of it will be straighter. It's like graphical information. So what I can do here is, well, it's not super curvy, but I can definitely just, you know, help that by just straightening up a little bit. And then in profile, this is something which is going to be really important. What's going on here? Because now that I got my mouth in there, is my chin too big? Is my chin too small? looking at my subject, do I even have this kind of dimpled chin thing here, or have I got someone whose lower chin is basically just this? You know, some people have a chin like this, where there is no curve shape there. If you were in class and you saw my Jonathan Banks, I'll have it up on tomorrow. If you saw my Jonathan Banks sculpt, that pretty much has no bottom kind of curves to the lip, because that's just him. Like I said, is it too small? Is the distance from the lower lip to this section here, is that too long, too short? Make adjustments, you know. This is all stuff that your reference is going to tell you. And making a mouth at this, again, we're only at 128 at this point. We've not done any jumps in resolution at all. We're still at 128. You know, if I was to Dynamesh this now, because some of this I'm pulling it a bit, because I might intentionally Dynamesh it, lose some of that information, as you see, but I'll bring it back in. Especially, this is something I'd often do if, like, when I'm at the end, I know I'm about to jump up to a higher resolution, and I want to even out the information I can, strengthen some of those forms as much as I can, so when it Dynameshes up that other resolution, it doesn't smooth those sharp details out anymore, because obviously when I Dynamesh, it kind of smooths it out a little bit. So when I do that, now I can go back in and just kind of like strengthen stuff out, bring that in there, make that node. We talk about that node of the mouth. And you know, all over the face, we'll be doing that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I've not done here is try to do any of the 5Ps in the mouth. It's just because there's not enough resolution. You can do the lower one where you can just basically force that shape in there, but there's not enough resolution for us to really get that information in there. At this point, if I've got my eyes in there, my eyes sockets with eyelids, I've got nose, mouth, lips, ears. Now I can jump up to the next resolution, which I might do quite a big jump and not go to, you know, if you're following 32, 64, 128, I'm not going to go 256. I'm probably going to jump up to something like 512, because at this point, I'm starting to get into the realm of big details. So let's do it. Oh, I was right then. Geometry, clay built Dynamesh, sorry. So yeah, 128. The next one in our power of 2 kind of jumps would be 256. I do want to stress as well, I'm using these numbers just because that's the power of 2. We're starting off as 32, which is one of our power of 2 numbers. Remember our textures, 32, 64, 128. So I always do that. But if you just kind of make these jumps, you don't have to be this number. Just kind of make these jumps somewhere around there. You can go to 160 if you want. Instead of going to 128, go to 160. That difference isn't really going to make much of a difference. But in this case, I'm going to go to 512. I'm really going to jump up now. So check out the resolution. Bang. So we're really jumping up. We still can't get tons of detail in there. But at this stage, this would be where I'd leave most of my sculpts before taking it on to the next level. Because what I can do now is, again, start to just sketch stuff out. Start to simplify stuff. Smooth stuff out. I'm still going to try and not use the clay buildup as much as possible. I might accidentally use it. But here I can, again, just sharpen that off a little bit. Use the... Oh, I didn't shape my lips before, but I should have shaped my lips before. But, you know, shape my lips. Clay buildup. Let's bring in some of that information. So I've got that P in the middle. Step back. How's that look? For this, I really should be looking at reference. So I'm going to just bring in that center P. Make sure it's not too dominant or too weird looking. That's looking okay. So you can see, going from that flat plane I just had with this new resolution to start adding a little bit more curve, it's really starting to come together. And then start to just build out those other 2 P's either side. Now you notice how I'm building these out using that counter stroking technique I do. I'm not just going blah. I'm building them out, and then almost like as I get to the end, I'm straightening them like this. Pay attention to how I'm doing it. There we go. How's that look? That was alright. Yep. Looks not bad. A little bit stylized. But so far, so good. Yeah, it's starting to a little bit look like the actress where the outside here is very droopy. Now to get that lower lip split, what I'm going to do is first of all put that split in there. So find the center line, slightly put it in there, and then start to just. There we go. And then. Now the reason why I'm really not bothered about things looking perfect and smooth is because I'm nowhere near the texturing phase. I'm nowhere near the detailing phase. All I'm doing here is building up form. I'm really using that finer detail to the crispy nature of this brush. This is why I love it. You know, it's a little bit harsh, it's a little bit crispy. I love that. I like leaning into that and utilizing that to help me build form. My brush is starting to get a little bit smaller, yes, but I'm still not detailed brush size. I'm still, this could be a bit bigger. I'm still kind of, big brush. And all I'm doing at this stage, this is going into detailing realm at this point. All I'm doing at this stage is literally just going through to certain areas and strengthen them up. Almost overdoing the details at first to then knock them back later on, but I'm overdoing the lips a little bit. I'm overdoing the mouth a little bit. Because I've got that new resolution, I can add a bit more form, a little bit more smoothness. I can have nice transitional edges. So a nice one here would be the way that upper lip descends into the corner of the mouth. I can use them little nodes we've been talking about to just place them up. Blend them in. Being as light-handed as I can, because what I don't want to do is make these be all crazy like this. And again, I'm using that kind of counter-stroke technique I keep. Really watch how I sculpt. I'm not doing this, and I hardly ever do that. I try to hardly ever do that. I'm always going the counter direction to where I'm kind of building up. And I'm almost like wrapping round the form as well. So you see there, as I was building up that form in that kind of curve, I can just almost like match it when I'm stroking. Landmark. Bum chin. Clear build up. Build it up. Or push it back sometimes. So. And once again, I've been doing this for a long, long time. Sometimes as well when I'm sculpting, if I'm doing videos, I'm watching the video capture, not necessarily the screen. That's what I'm doing right now. So you have to relax. You can't be pensive with this. So as soon as you start worrying over stuff, you start detail. It's like when you worry, you detail. When you relax, you sketch, kind of thing. It's just a funny one. Yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of call it here, but the mouth is one of the last things I do, because there's, even within that little small area, there's quite a lot of information. There's quite a lot of shape going on. So, and for me, that's like moving down the face as well. So obviously, making the head in stage one, pulling out the chin, pushing in the side of the head, pulling out the neck, pushing in the eye sockets, pulling out the nose, pulling out the ears. Cool. We jump up a resolution, and then we start to get in the eye sockets, the eyelids, all that kind of information. We start to get a bit more information using the value that we've got, the resolution, to get a bit more information in the eyelids, cheeks, and that kind of stuff. Nowhere near touching the mouth. Building out that mouth muzzle that we can then obviously sculpt into, and then we jump up that resolution. Once we've sculpted in that mouth very, very basically at 128, we get the damn standard, we slice it in, we get the positioning right. We make sure that the position's right. We can make adjustments if it's too thin, too tall, too wide, whatever. We can make all of them adjustments while it's still at 128. And then we jump up, because by that point, we should have everything kind of in the right position. It's still ripe for moving stuff around. Someone might come over your shoulder and go, that's completely wrong, you need to change some stuff. I can still grab the move brush and move it around, because it's still low resolution. 512 is not, 512 isn't a global thing. On this that we're doing right here, 512 isn't a big thing. If you start doing stuff at bigger or smaller scales, then you'll kind of understand, hopefully understand how Dynamesh kind of works in the background. But just while we're dealing with this sphere, 512 is, you're still not getting a shit ton of detail. Enough to really start to shape it. And hopefully this is when people will start to get a bit more confident, especially if you just watch me sculpt. It's one of the best things you do is watch me sculpt. I'm the guy who's teaching you this stuff. Watch me do the things that I teach you. You might be able to see how I think. Watch how much I turn the mesh. Watch when I zoom in. Admittedly, sometimes I do zoom in too much sometimes, but that's a thing. Watch the decisions I make. Watch how I'm not always, yes, I did a bit of work on the mouth there, but I'm not done with the mouth at all. Far from it, but I move to somewhere else. I leave that alone. I don't overthink it, and I'll work on the cheek a little bit more, and then I'll just push it in a little bit, and I'll just do this. All this information. Notice as well, now that we're at this resolution, I'm still not using the smooth brush at all. I'm not going through. I could do technically. I could go through and start smoothing stuff. But I'm not. I'm still using that clay build-up brush. I've not really changed any of the settings. I sometimes accidentally knock the focal shift by accident, so I've got to shift that back down. But really what I'm doing here is using that noise to build up. And it almost smooths out the mesh. It gives me direction. It gives me dynamicism. It kind of smooths out the mesh in a way. But it's not me going through the smooth brush and actually smoothing it out. Because by accident, people do that and then they end up over smoothing stuff. And they lose the dynamicism in the features. And all I'm doing again is just taking away and adding where I feel I must do. Looking at the reference. Again, mirror signals maneuver. Every 10 seconds, looking at your reference. Observing your reference. Looking. If I'm working on the nose, and especially if I'm working in this area here, I'm looking, okay, what does the wing of the nose look like? What does this nostril look like? Okay, I'm looking at my reference. Okay, so it's a bit of an, okay, I'm going to look at this. Does this look like it? No, okay, I'm going to do that. If you're chasing likeness. If you're not chasing likeness, just feel like, that's his nose, that's my nose. Does this look kind of right? Okay. And yeah, I'd spend some time at this point slowing down and not being as brutal. Still being quite brutal, but at this point I'm going to start to shape stuff a bit more, knowing again that if I Dynamesh this, I might lose some information. You lose less and less information the higher in resolution you go. But for instance, I've got quite a nice crisp area here, but if I Dynamesh it, it becomes a little bit soft. Yeah. So again, that's the mouth. It's not at a stage where I'm really needing to worry about it. I'm going to come back to it. All I've done there again is build out. Come on, load. There you go. I've built out that shape, that muzzle at first, and I've sliced in with the damn standard. Slice it in. Measuring that position, and the pupils downwards. It's like the top half of the bottom third of the bottom third for the where the lips meet. I chisel out using clay build-up a little bit of information, corners of the mouth here, like what I'm doing here. If I need to make any adjustments up here, maybe my original muzzle was far too bulbousy. Maybe I need to flatten it out a little bit. Maybe it's too flat, and maybe I need to bulbous out. Maybe I need to add a bit of curve to it. That's what I'm going to do at this point. Clay build-up, that's all I'm doing. Clay build-up and just thinking about what I'm doing. And then there, I did a little bit of build. Now that I've got a mouth in there, I can build up a little bit of information around it. Bit of filtrum. And then I can use the damn standard then to, like I just done then, to almost like pinch and sharpen the lips. So I'm almost like doing what old Renaissance alabaster sculptors used to do. If you watch them, if you look at their sculptures, some of the areas of the mouth and some of the areas of the bodies will be sharper than they really should be. That's because it's catching the light. They're doing that so the light makes a shape and it makes a form. So here I've done that, so I've got a nice graphical lower lip, or upper lip. And then do a bit of shaping if I need to. So we started it again, didn't we? So there you go. So slicing in, chiseling away, moving, positioning, building up some information that I need to, using the dam standard to sharpen the upper lip, clay build out some stuff underneath it. Again, just use the clay build up. And then that's where we jumped up in the resolution. So that's, I could have gone on for ages in this resolution, just constantly just like working and sharpening and moving around. But eventually, you know, I'd have to jump up to a high resolution, because at this point, our mouth should be the last thing to do. We should have ears, we should have noses, we should have eyes. Really, the mouth should be the last thing to do. And then we up the resolution, because then we can start working on everything as a whole. And then from there, when you up the resolution, it's just about refining stuff. So what I'm doing here is I'm building out the 5 Ps. So the 3 top Ps and then the 2 bottom Ps. Maybe overdoing it a little bit, especially with this material where the shadows are really dominant. You know, overdoing it a little bit to then push it back later on. And then I can start building up and refining around the mouth, the muscle structure. Especially if I'm doing something like Antony, Ione, or something that's like an alabaster sculpture. A lot of this information is quite prominent under the right light. And notice as well how my silhouette isn't really changing at that point. My silhouette changes a lot back here, because obviously I'm adding stuff. But then it stops changing. It's more that I'm refining the shapes that are there. I'm building some of the shadows, or I'm taking away sometimes. And I'm moving around to him. See, I'm almost like moving around in a spiral. I'm doing the mouth and then up into the corners of the upper lip, round, then down into the chin, then up into the corner of the mouth again, then down from the nose. So I'm kind of doing this around the model. We are getting into the realm now of moving around the model a bit more. All the basics have been done by this point. The mouth is in there. It's not an open mouth. It's not got a moist mouth bag. It's not got a mouth bag where teeth and tongues are going to go. This is a sculpture. This is a sketch mouth that can be modified later on. You know, obviously this character can't open up his mouth because it's a solid shape. But everything should be there at this point. And again, it's dead simple. Let's go back just to remind ourselves one more time how we did it. We had the muzzle. We made that mass because there's a skull underneath here. So we made sure the mass was there, and then we just literally took that dam standard, positioned the corners of the mouth, scalpeled in where the lips meet. Do you see there? Did some movements, or even using the move brush. Look, check your references, check yourself. Maybe your maybe the kind of scaling thing. You know, your thumb width, your thumb depth, distance from your lower lip, from your lower nose to your upper lip. Maybe that works for you, because that's all I basically did for that. Is I just pulled it down because I thought that's too much of a short distance. Pulled it back a little bit. Started building up some information. That little nodey section there. Shape the lips a bit more. That's where I jumped up into resolution. You know, I'm just shaping the lips, thinking about that angle as well. So we're talking at the beginning about the angle of the lips. You know, the upper lip is going to be facing downwards, generally, like forward or downwards. The lower lip's basically going to be facing forward and upwards, and those two lines will intercross. That's what I'm also doing. I'm thinking about the angles of the lips, which needs me moving round, looking from all these angles. Does my character look like they're pursing the lips? Does my character look like they're on the verge of crying all the time? Because that's a whole thing, you know. There's too much underlip shadow, so your lower lip is too cavernous there. Because, you know, if you think about someone crying with a wobbly bottom lip, it means they've got a big lower lip like that. So it means they're making too much shadow here. A lot of information, because this has been a long video. I think it's been the longest one so far. But we've covered quite a lot. And a lot of it is just shape. So if we jump back to the Photoshop, a lot of it is just this shape we keep talking about, you know. The upper lip, think about that as a single plane. The lower lip, think about that as a single plane. Where do they point? And then think about where in the corners they meet. So is the lower lip overlapping the upper lip? Is the upper lip overlapping the lower lip? How curvy is it? how angled is it? So if it's a very shallow angle, if it's a very steep angle, how much information is in the corners of the mouth, so around here. So have you got quite big, soft shapes here, which is that kind of shape I make there, or is yours very flat? Like here, you can kind of see that it's very, so the laugh line's there. That's where that little node is. Or is yours quite prominent, so you can see there a little bit of that laugh line information, but that node is kind of there, making this really nice kind of triangle shape here, node shape here, and then your recess is there. All this stuff to think about, but not necessarily stuff you need to hardcore sculpt in. It's just stuff to think about. And again, we all know this information. We've all seen it every day. It's about accessing that information and just remembering that it's there. Oops, daisy. A lot of information, I know that. But hopefully if you go through this video slowly and just kind of assimilate this information, do some draw overs, take some pictures of yourself, maybe you can find the shapes on your own face, get some celebrities. Maybe hopefully you'll be able to find those shapes yourself. And just practice, just sculpt, or just draw as well. You know, obviously at this point in time, we've still not got our home licenses, so, you know, if you've got Nomad or if you've got Blender, just use them. If not, just literally draw out these shapes, or come into the building and use our computers. If there's space in the classroom, you should be able to get a seat in there and just use them and just practice. It's the biggest thing about this, practice. You're doing it twice a week. So you're already getting natural practice in class, but it doesn't mean that you can rely on that. You need to be putting tons of practice in. Because it's not hard. The techniques aren't hard. It's the subjects which are hard, and that's not my fault. You know, it's not my fault that people are hard to sculpt. But everyone wants to be a characterized. But then when it comes down to be a characterized, no one wants to be a characterized. Because we're just so awkward as individuals, aren't we? The human form. So loads of stuff to think about there, loads of stuff to cover. But it is super mega awesome. And if you've got the initial stages down, if you've got that stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 thing down, where it's just basically getting in the helmet, you know, you're already on the way. But that's got to be good. You know, you can't have a bad shape and then try and find the shape later on. It's going to be really, really hard. So make sure your stage 1 is a good shape. Stage 2, make sure your eye sockets are in the right position. You know, vertically and horizontally. Are they too far apart, too close together, too high up, too low down? Your maxilla ridge there that defines the cheekbone, and it also gives you a landmark for your nose. Make sure that's in the right place. Then pull your nose out. Then pull your ears out. Refine. Then put your eyelids in. Refine. Then put your mouth in there. Refine. Not that hard. Just needs practice, that's all. So that's the mouth. Long video, I know. Sorry, but it's just got to be what it is. But all mouths are the same, like I said. Like I said, I'm going to do the PDF as well, so that'll be a bit of a cheat sheet for you. So the next video I'm going to do is the eyes. So if you're watching eyes first this second, this is going to be a bit of a weird time loop for you. So I'll see you in the next one.